start by talking a little bit about the theory behind it, and what I look at and how I kind of break down damage control. And then we can look at some practical examples and try to find some charts where I can point out some of the things that I was mentioning in the theoretical aspect. And then if anybody has any questions, we can go through those as well. Important to note is that because, we might all be following the same methodology, our personalities as traders are differ vastly amongst each other. And it's important to note that affects every aspect of your trading. So that goes from your risk assessment to your capital management, to all the way down to your entries, and to how you interpret top-down analysis, what you like, what you don't like, what your fears are in terms of trading. And the same applies for damage control. So while there is a methodology and a way to do it, people are going to be doing, executing the entries and executing the technique probably in a way in which they feel comfortable, right? Because damage control is really about, using washing techniques, using hedging, and not everybody is comfortable doing that. And everybody has a different skill level as well. So your entries might not be exactly where somebody else's entries are. You might not wash micros in the same way as, X, Y, or Z person does it either. You might prefer to take gains from another asset to wash micros in the asset that you're trying to clean. There's so many options and so many ways to do it, and you'll develop that through time in terms of how to get out of a bad trade. But it's, you still need to have the base, and you still need to clearly understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay. So the first thing to keep in mind really is to understand what a plan B or what damage control is. And that's pretty much our way of saying, this is where our stop loss is, right? So Mike wrote a very good article about stop losses yesterday or the day before, and he did nail it on the head. I mean, if a stop loss is there, and on top of that, you're placing it in the at a spot where everybody else is placing their stop losses, you're just a target for the market makers. You're a target for the institutionals. You're a target for everybody who knows how to hunt your stops. And while I'm not saying that stops are bad in any way, there are many reasons where you would use hard stops, and we'll look at that as well. The important thing to note is that a mental stop works in exactly the same way in theory. It is a price point or a price zone where your trade idea, your initial bias, your entries, all your positions as a whole are invalidated. It's a place where you say, crap, I was wrong. I need to get out of here, right? That is a stop loss. No matter whether it's a hard stop where you're actually placing a stop loss order with your broker, or it's a mental stop where you're triggering some sort of damage control action to try to rectify the situation. So the triggers are going to be the same as stop losses. It's an area where you say, okay, my idea wasn't good. I need to get out of this trade. I need to wash. I'm deep. I'm a quarter lot in. This is not going my way. It's not turning. We actually have some sentiment that reinforces the idea that I'm wrong. We can get another crash. The next level at which price can go to is so far away. I cannot tolerate this drawdown. Those points are where you draw up your plan to get out of the trade, right? And to be honest, it's going to be before you get to that point of panic, right? Because once you've gotten to a panic point, you're going to have issues executing your techniques because you're not going to be fully concentrated. You're not going to be fearless. You're not going to be serene as you're executing your damage control techniques. So you always have to keep in mind kind of two levels where you want to trigger your damage control. And that is going to depend on where your panic area is. Like, where are you going to freak out? So look at where you're going to freak out, and then move that mental stop to a place where, you're wrong on the trade. You want to get out. You don't like the drawdown, but you can deal with it. I mean, you're trading small, right? So damage control should always be a serene kind of, pre-planned, calm execution of a plan. If you've gotten to a panic point, you've gone too far and you've placed your mental stop way too low, or you've been holding and hoping, two things that you shouldn't be doing as a trader. So basically, in terms of the correlation between a stop loss and damage control, it's just that it's exactly the same. It's where you want to get out. Okay, it's where you want to get out, and you want to put it in a comfortable place, and not in a place where it's where you're in pain, in severe pain. I mean, you might be in a little bit of pain, but if you've put your stop loss in a severe pain area, that's going to affect how you execute your damage control techniques, and that is not good, because that'll cause you to to commit some mistakes as you're trading. So I don't think I have to go into hard stops more than to say that, yeah, they're perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine. FIFO traders in the US who are not able to, through their brokers, to hedge, or they're not able to, to exit micros and wash, they might not have a choice. And in many cases, traders like that do need to use hard stops. Another example of where hard stops are appropriate is in, for example, high turbulence, high volatile environments. For example, if you're trading some emerging market assets and there's some geopolitical turbulence, there's some election, there's a big giant oil crash, or any severe out of the norm situation in a highly volatile asset where spreads tend to open wide, and where the risk is much higher than in your usual assets, that's where hard stops are valid, because that's a point where you don't even want to risk the price going back there, even if you're executing damage control. You don't want to. It's and in most cases, you're not going to get into those high risk situations anyway, or you shouldn't. But if you do, it's appropriate to have a hard stop, and there's nothing wrong with it. Another situation where hard stops might be appropriate is for absolute beginners. Anybody who is not comfortable with damage control, does not fully understand it yet, has not had a chance to practice it well enough, maybe on a demo account for a couple of weeks or something, and they're not confident in their ability to get out of a bad trade, you need a hard stop loss. Yeah. So you cannot just say, oh man, I don't know how to get out of a bad trade, but I've heard Alex and Mike say that stop losses, shouldn't be used, and we should be doing damage control, but I don't really get damage control. Screw it, I'm going to trade anyway. That's not a good idea. And I think it's important to understand what your limitations are when you're trying to learn. And a hard stop is going to get you out of trouble in many, many cases. Now, does that mean that you need to place a hard stop in the same place as everybody else, where, the typical traditional internet teachings of newbie traders, look at the last swing low and place your stop right there, or get 20 pips and place your stop right there? No, I mean, you still have to be smart. And hopefully by now you've understood, a little bit about stop hunting and how the market makers move. And you'll be a little bit smarter about your stop loss, and you'll place it a little bit farther away or in a more unconventional zone that will account for potential stop hunts and things like that. But, they are appropriate if you're not confident in damage control techniques. And I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. And Mike did emphasize that in the article yesterday, that there's nothing wrong. We do not advocate against hard stop losses. What we're saying is that we have a better way that we like, that we enjoy, that gives us profit to get out of bad trades once that technique is understood fully and can be executed properly. But do we think anybody who uses hard stops, is crazy? No, not necessarily. Everybody has a different type of risk, tolerance, and for some people, hard stops are the only way they can trade in peace. Yeah, and that's absolutely 100% respectable. So, all right, so let's move on from that once that's cleared out. So in 99% of the cases, I'm never going to have a hard stop because I'm going to do damage control.